ready to crank up the volume because you're about to enter the realm of rebels and rock stars. Unleashing the thunder from down under the stage. We're diving deep with a deviance of melody, rhythm, and chaos. Now push up your sleeves and get ready to dive into the pit. It's time for Sitting with the Slimy Bastards, Music Edition.
So this is the Slimy Bastard podcast show. I got the one and only, and has really kind of become a dear friend of mine that I've got to know over this last year. And we've had a ball the last couple times we've been around each other. And Andrew Spaulding with Corpse Paints Record is joining us today. And we were out in Vegas together for the Danzig Down concert and Cro-Mags and that, which, by the way, was an awesome show. And but we kind of got on this subject of walking around Vegas of, you know, who inspires who. And then Andrew posted on Facebook the other day, Prince, how'd you word it? Because I don't want to mess it up of what your words were on it.
Prince is the best musician in the room, and it didn't matter who was in the room or what instrument.
Right. So with Prince, obviously you're saying Prince is one of the best, and then I commented back and said, well, you can't forget about Jimi Hendrix. So I brought up the subject then. Well, who would you rather? How did we word it? Was it who was better, Jimi Hendrix or Prince? Right?
Yeah, you said guitar, and you said you're like, even a guitar, you would take Prince over Hendrix, and I was like, yeah, all day. And you're like, wow, that's pretty brave of you. And I'm like, well, and then we just started exchanging opinions, and then
right,
this would be a great podcast.
Yeah. So I brought it up. I talked to Mike Hogerbeest the other day because we're gonna do a podcast with the videos and shit that he's been doing.
Yeah.
And I asked him the question. I said, "This is a quick question. Spaulding and I are going to get ready to do this podcast on Hendrix or Prince. Who would you have on that?" And he goes, "Without a doubt, Hendrix." Because, and he brought up an interesting point, and I didn't really think about it. What's that?
He lives on the West Bank, if you know anything about New Orleans.
Yeah, too bad he wasn't on here. He actually said he'd love to come on, but he was busy filming some stuff with corrosion of conformity and doing some of that stuff that he's working on. Yeah. And but anyway, but the point I was going to make in what he said is, you got to realize when Hendrix passed away, he was only 27.
Right.
So, and you talk about his music career, it probably a span of less than 10 years, really, professionally, right. Maybe 7, right?
Sure.
So you talk about a young age plus the age of the young individual with only 7 years, and what he all contributed to the remaining years to where we are today. It's pretty fascinating, really.
That's your opening argument, huh?
That's my open, and I actually had a different one, because if you hear some of the lyrics of Hendrix stuff, like one of my favorite songs by him, "When Cries Mary," there's a deep lyric in that
it's true.
Will the past names remember, or will the wind remember those of the past? I'd have to look it up, but it's one of the, but that's a pretty deep lyric for a guy who at that time when he wrote that was what, maybe 24, 23. So
yeah, I agree, man. I think Hendrix was iconic. I think he was definitely an innovator without a doubt, especially being left-handed and having the guitar upside down and all that good stuff of that he had to go through to learn. So to say that he could be duplicated, no. He cannot be duplicated, because you can't duplicate such originality. Now you can imitate it, and you can maybe precede it and do it better. And what I mean by better is, to your point, Jimi Hendrix passed away at 27.
Right.
Prince passed away at 58. So Prince had a whole other lifetime of musicianship. So he had 2 lifetimes of Jimi Hendrix
Right.
to develop a craft and to become better. Where Jimmy did, yeah, to your point, had that small window, and a lot of that, as we know, was under the influence most of the time, a lot of the time in that window. So I don't know if we ever really got to see a full Jimi Hendrix. So I don't know if it could fairly be a fair comparison, but by the two's body of work, from what they accomplished, Jimi Hendrix recorded his first record in his early 20s. I think his first album came out as the Jimi Hendrix Experience. He was like 23, 24 years old. Prince was 18 when he put out his first record, when he signed out. So Prince was a badass out the gate, even at 77, where Hendrix, it took a few years. Now, I understand folks are going to want to throw in the
Vietnam.
of the
Wasn't
time of
he was
60s
in
and 70s, but Prince put out his first record in 1977. And we're not talking decades of difference. So yes, Jimmy
right.
did break some barriers and kick down the door, but Prince wasn't like all that far behind it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he just happened to live longer in a lifetime to where we consider
Right.
Prince in our from our generation. But technically, if Jimmy doesn't overdose, we would have that same opinion of Jimmy, that he would have been around. And who knows what he would have done. Would he have done something like Prince, and we would have seen him progress into other instruments and maybe gone into film? Or would he just been like Eddie Van Halen? And no offense, Eddie Van Halen's a god. He's right, but you
Right.
can tell when it's Eddie. And not all of Van Halen, Eddie songs sound the same, but there's not a whole lot of diversity, right?
Right.
And Prince has diversity, and I think that's where Prince wins the argument, because he's just a better musician. Now, Jimi Hendrix might be a better player, and if you put Prince at 27 and Hendrix at 27 at both their prime, and you had them play the same lick, I might give it to you that Hendrix might, pull it off fancier and make it sound a little bit cleaner. But if you're talking about the body of work, and if you're talking about time, Prince became a way better musician on all instruments, not just guitar. And I think that says a
Sure.
whole lot.
Sure. I understand that. Like you look at look at the Super Bowl halftime show, probably one of the best that there was, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take that away of the musicianship of all that. I'm just talking for myself, and as far as like influential,
Yeah.
that's where my argument on going with the Hendrix side of things of. But you're right on the diversity side of Prince. So I get it on both sides. It's a fun
Yeah, it
comparison,
is.
of
There's no right or no wrong answer, right? Because they're both
yeah,
groundbreaking at what they did. They both reinvented instruments. They both reinvented songwriting for their time. So I mean, they're both,
right,
very pure like verses of, of a clear cut winner.
right.
There's not,
Have
it's
you
hard.
have you ever, when you've been up to Minneapolis and that on tour, have
Have.
you been by Prince's place, or have you
Oh,
toured
no.
it?
I have
Okay.
not been to his place. I heard that's something recent you can do. You can take tours. I hear that's
Right.
really cool. But I have been to the venue that he played at, that he decorated the backstage
Right.
area. Is it I don't,
It used to be called the Quest Club.
what's it called?
It was it's changed names a couple times, but I've known it as the Quest Club,
Okay, that might have been it.
or was it the Mystique?
I can't remember. First
But
Avenue.
it had the purple. No,
Yeah,
First Avenue was I think about two
different place
blocks away from,
altogether.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But this place had like the purple velvet curtains,
Yes.
and the backstage, and for all the bands was actually upstairs, where it was like a
Right.
horseshoe
Yes.
type thing, and then you could look down over the crowd and the side of the stage right up on the top there. And that was all done. That was all decorated by Prince. In fact, if I remember, I think some of Purple Rain was filmed there. But I seen Typo there, what, 2 or 3 times, I think. So that's probably what you're.
I was
So
there
I bet
with.
you that's what you're thinking of.
Yes. Yeah.
But what I'm getting to though is if you come back, we meet up in Minneapolis or whatever. My aunt and uncle actually only live a block away from Prince's place there.
Okay.
And so I've been by there maybe a half dozen times. But you're right, you can tour it and that. I've always wanted to do it just to see it, just say I've seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Genius.
Yeah. But
I think the best comment on our thread that started this podcast was from Jules of Root Brain that says apparently he was a hell of a basketball player too. not just an all around musician.
uh,
Right.
yeah,
And then
so I wonder
sketches gold, right? So
where's he at? Isn't he in what country is he in right now?
Brazil? Yeah.
So what time is it in Brazil?
Who knows, man? Who knows? Oh, somebody's on. Hey, for everybody on Official Corpse Paint TikTok, hop on over if you see the Slimy Bastards podcast. Make sure you're following there. This is Jason Rolene. And
Yeah, it's just in
you can catch either feed right now. So that's where I'm at.
Mine's just a one-way audio because of how I'm recording it and that. So it kind of sucks because they can't hear you or anything. So, but anyway, speaking of Root Brain, that new EP sounds awesome. Those that you haven't heard it or anything like that, go check it out at Root Brain. It's on all the streaming platforms. Go to Corpse Paints Records. You could find all the info and where to download it, even buy. You got some of the CDs left, don't you?
CDs, absolutely. And then vinyl is available as well. And then we're going to be re-releasing Breakwater, their debut album. It didn't have a United States release. It was only released in Europe. So we're going to re-release that this summer and do a vinyl release and a CD releases as well. On top of, there is 4 songs on the Mother Tomb EP. All 3 of them have been released as singles. So there's still one more song that we're going to do a video and single for before we drop the Breakwater stuff. But Breakwater, is already out on all of the streaming platforms. It just didn't get a physical release in the States. And so we figured, since we did Mother Tomb and Breakwater, such a great record. And it's, it's not like it's super old, to where it's like, pulling out a dinosaur. So it's definitely very, current still to go ahead and put it out, even though it's, it's been a couple of years.
Sure. I gotta say it shocked me on how is a lot different than what I was expecting, honestly.
Oh yeah,
in a good way. Yeah,
sure, I agree. They're a sleeper hit,
right? And it's very, very catchy. I'm excited for you guys are in the works of working out some stuff to get them here in the United States and that.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people don't know about them yet. But when you hear it, a lot of people are like, "Holy shit, this is really good." They have that hook in that one song that they just released a video for that's just really, really catchy, and it stays in your head all day. Basically.
Yeah, dude, it's really good. I caught up with Victor 2 years ago at Hell's Heroes Fest when Triptychon was performing a Celtic Frost set. And I met Victor when he was a touring guitar player in Celtic Frost, when I was working for Typo Negative. And Victor and I stayed friends for years. And he's like, so I hadn't seen Celtic Frost. Obviously, we lost Martin, so they disbanded, and Triptychon's been Tom G's full band, and he brought Victor over from the touring lineup of Celtic Frost to be his additional guitar player in Triptychon. So when I got with Victor, I wasn't even aware of Root Brain, and so we were just chatting. Right. Hey, you might be interested in this band Root Brain I'm in. I'm like, well, yeah, if you're, what's it like? And he's like, oh, it's not like this. And he's like, well, there's elements. And he's like, we call it black grunge. And I was like,
Which is you never heard it before. Have you
yeah, I
ever
was like,
heard that term, black grunge?
oxymoron. I was like, is that like jumbo shrimp? I'm like,
Yeah.
is that what they're doing in over there? And so he laughed and he's like, no, that's exactly the purpose of that is was drawing from a lot of those influences, but the fusion of it is not anticipating. It seems like such a hard mix, but when you hear
Right.
how they blend it, you're like, holy shit, this is really good. Like it reminds me of a little Faith No More with
Yep.
some Mr. Bungle, which is obviously Mike Patton influenced, Alice in Chains for the grunge factor, but then Victor's in Dark Fortress and Triptychon, which is some of that black and death metal, and you can hear like that style of guitar sound mixed in
Right.
some of those layers in it. Man, it's so cool. It's really good
Yeah.
stuff.
No, I love it. I can't wait to even see it live, honestly. But
I know.
it's,
Yeah, it's really good. And I was texting via WhatsApp with Thomas, who is, the brain, if you will,
uh,
pun intended, behind Root Brain, the bass player, and comes up with a lot of the guitar and music, main songwriter. Uh,
yeah.
he's gearing up for this summer. They're going to get together and put more stuff. So very possible we could have new material before the end of this year. More than likely in 26, we'll see how it progresses. But yeah, that's definitely planned for put together new stuff this summer.
And what if you can? Has there been any talks of what tour is available or what you guys are looking at for any of that? Or
In fact, while we were having this conversation, my phone alert popped up, and it was from a booking agent that all kind of lining all that stuff out now to see what is going to be out there coming that time as summer festivals are already kicking off here. We're already starting to book 2026, so there's a lot of 2026 talk already happening.
nice.
So
Yeah, it's kind of weird because it's only April 2025,
I
right?
know. I know.
It's just kind of, but I was, everything's kind of booked up already or
Yeah,
for the
well, a
summer
lot of
already. It's not like it's
correct.
because you got to have your list and all that together
You
by an
nailed
X
it.
amount of time.
That's
So
it.
I mean, I get that. I'm really disappointed. I was really looking forward to seeing the Vegas. What was that? What was that called? Psycho Fest or Psycho Circus or something
Psycho
in
Las
Vegas.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a hell of a lineup that just
That
went to
was fun.
a hand biscuit
That was a great festival. Yeah.
or hand basket biscuits.
Yeah. Yeah, we should do something similar like that around those parts. But yeah, I heard a really good conversation the other day on a podcast of talking about the climate of how we grew up and how the climate festivals are, of how it's kind of changed to where, times being tight, if you will, you know, people are now kind of like doing that 4-day fest with their buddies and seeing hundreds of bands, even though they may catch one band for like 5 minutes. Um, it seems sometimes that club experience is still getting even more difficult to come by,
Right. Yeah.
So, um,
And that's just it. That's a fun subject in a way. Because you take, like you just said, a club, right? In a way, you need the club because it's not like you're playing festivals in the middle of winter. And you can't really do that, right? In at least Northern America.
right.
Um, and you kind of need the club though, too. But in the summer, you have all these festivals around, which people are going to go to the festival versus,
Sure.
you know, me personally, as a fan of music, I'd go to both. But
Correct.
to the
Yeah.
average fan who you're picking and choosing of where you're going to spend your money, what tour, what show are we going to go to this year? And you
Yeah.
talk across the whole board of everything, right? Um, what are you going to sell as that experience? And that's going to be, obviously probably a big music festival. But
Sure.
Um, you take the club experience. I'd much rather, if I was to pick, I'd much rather see a band in a club over a festival.
All day long.
And I mean, you've been around enough shows like I have that you get that club atmosphere. It's a smaller crowd. I think a band puts on a better show um,
I agree.
versus a big festival because you're crunched on time. You don't get to interact with the crowd like you would in a club. It's a whole different experience.
It is.
Um, and that's where you kind of need the club of for that. But and like you said, that's the shitty part about all this together. Because now you look at it from the band side of things. Obviously, they're getting offered more money to do a big festival versus small little club for probably half the money. I mean, I get both sides of it.
Yeah, man. It's definitely a different, day and age. So of course you're stoked. I always thought the festivals were great. I mean, I grew up a lot on the punk rock stuff too. I've worked at 4 Warped Tours, 20 years ago, and I looked forward to those in the 90s all the time. So I love festivals, but I was at both. I went and saw Rancid when they were in the club, and I went to see him at Warped
Speaking
Tour.
of a Warp's tour,
Yeah, you drink
it's
the
actually drinking a Warp. Yeah,
and those
but
are back. That's actually what they give you when you work, for there, because a lot of the Warp Tours are in every parking lot in America. They're not, actually at facilities. So, these parking lots don't have water, and so Monster provides the water, and so it's tour water. So every morning when you're setting up your tent, the Monster people are literally coming by with cases of water and like, hey, did you
oh
get your
really?
water
Uh-huh.
rations for the day? And that's what the water that they provide for the staff to drink.
Was it what you did you ever go out on the Ozfest tours?
I didn't, not as an employee, but as a fan, I went and
Okay.
when Jeremy Slitsy,
Yeah.
he's done several Ozfests, and I went out and hung out with him at an Ozfest.
So you take the Ozfest experience versus a Warp Tour experience. It's pretty much the same, just different music. And like you said, um, a facility with Ozfest versus a parking lot with a Warp Tour. So
Right.
would you say, I mean, you've been to both. I was supposed to go to a Warp Tour. I can't even remember which one. And then we ended up going to some club show in Des Moines versus going to the Warp Tour. I can't even remember who it was. But anyway, so I can't speak to a Warp Tour, but Ozfest, I've been to a couple of them.
Yeah.
Would you say they're pretty much the same?
Yeah, they're pretty similar. Yeah. I've been to several Ozfest. Yeah, I would say Warp Tour is definitely more stages and a lot more going on.
Mhm.
Ozfest was kind of like 2 stages, was their main
Right,
thing. Warped Tour had like 5 to 7 stages. They would have two
right.
main stages. Um, but yeah, pretty much the same thing. But Warped Tour was all day. I know Ozfest, they would try to make them all days too. But yeah, man, they were definitely. I felt Warped Tour was definitely way more interactive for fans, where Ozfest was kind of more just like going to an all day concert. Warped Tour had a lot of there was 100 bands, so all those bands had their merchandise tents. So
Uh,
although most of those times those bands would be out there hanging out with, so there was a lot of more community aspect of it
sure.
from, and where the Ozfest, the ones that I attended to were like at the sheds, so it felt like
Right.
you were at a thing. So Warp Tour definitely had a lot more of its own character, for sure. But yeah, but ultimately it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
You remember Tattoo the Earth?
I do.
They only did that one, what was it, 1 year? But that was a hell of a lineup. I mean, look at that. Look at
Yeah,
that lineup of that deal. And
sure.
it kind of had that atmosphere too. Not so much of like an Ozfest because it's kind of more toned down, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So what's the latest with sun don't shine. What are we doing here?
Dude, sun don't shine. So exciting. Working on a new video to hopefully get out by the end of April. We'll see. I got to get with Kirk, probably April, stretching it now. It'd probably be around the 1st of May, first week or two of May. Kirk's recording with Down, so I've got to just get some video footage of Kirk. I've got the video footage of the other 3 guys. He was just been busy with Crowbar, then that Down tour, then Down went straight into recording right after the Down tour with Danzig wrapped up. So when he gets available time, I will cruise into New Orleans, shoot some footage, send that over to Rob, FAFO Media, and then it's pretty much done. So we can execute that video. And then this summer, man, we're all going to be getting together, finishing out 4 songs, as you know, and we got a lot of fun stuff that maybe we can save for another episode if you want to roll that out. But lots of cool stuff coming up this summer, especially for the social media stuff. I got a really cool plan to engage users, so that way folks can experience this with us, since the technology exists. And a lot of this process, there used to be a lot of gatekeeping, which, you know, is still cool. Like, we're not going to let unreleased songs go unheard before release, and we're not going to do that type of stuff. But behind the scenes in the process of watching, and then, you know, if something happens spontaneous where the guys want to release something on the moment right there, then of course we will. That'll be their decision, you know. That's what's cool about it. Yeah, I would like to maybe see if there's somehow we could stream a live performance at some point, since they'll be together. So I'm excited for this summer. Sun Don't Shine is going to be together for a full month, recording some new material to finish out the full length. We're going to shoot another video while we're there, and then lots of other cool stuff happening.
I'm excited to get down there and see y'all guys again. That was a ball, and we're making
Yeah, so
that
you're coming down,
plan.
and we got some festivities planned with the podcasting, right? That we won't let everything going out. We won't tell everybody. We'll wait until we get things on the books before we start making announcements.
You know, honestly, what I'm excited for this trip, and this is just me personally, is one of my best friends who we went to concerts since we were in high school together. You know, we were talking about this last night. One of the first bands he ever met was Bullet Boys. And you got to keep in mind, this is, you know, you're talking sophomore, juniors in high school, right? So this is before what we're doing now with technology. You just seen these guys on MTV and all that, and you thought they were larger than life,
right?
And you know it because you lived that time frame.
Sure.
But that was one of the first bands he ever met. They ended up talking or whatever. Something was going on with they couldn't get a ride to the stadium that they were playing at. They were opening up for Cinderella, Winger, and Bullet Boys.
Wow, that's a lineup. I would love that show.
And anyway, the guys at Bullet Boys ended up in his Nova, and they took him to where they were going. Signed the hood rest, they got pictures and all that shit, right? So you keep it now. You think about that. You go back to small little town Iowa, and you're telling all your friends and everything what's going on, what happened. You were the fucking shit then that you got to do this, right? And that's what you got, that high, if you so to say, that emotional high, and that overall feeling that you were part of something bigger than life.
Yeah.
And you wanted to do that every fucking day.
Sure.
That's where we got into this. But what I'm saying is we were talking last night, and he's the sheriff up here in Wright County. He doesn't get to do a lot of this stuff just because he's obviously busy with his job. But he is so looking forward to coming down and hanging out, because he grew up with all this stuff. He's met the guys at Typos a bunch of different times. But he's just excited because we did this as growing up, if that makes sense.
It does.
And he's always wanted to be a part of this podcast, but with political reasons and all this, he's got to watch some of it till he's almost done serving of retiring and that. So
yeah.
but what I'm getting to is he's coming down with us. Obviously, Gary's going to be with us. And speaking of Gary, that time in Vegas, I mean, that was a good time in Vegas. That first night of going to the concert, he tied one on pretty good,
Dude,
and
that was
we
oh,
it was a great it was a I thought Down sounded awesome. Danzig sounded really good.
oh, that was explosive, was it not?
Yeah, and then to come to find out that um, Dave from
Hank,
what's
Dave
that?
Sabo.
Yeah, came out and even played at the end because we didn't even realize that until afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, that was a really really good show. And just to say, just to go to Vegas and being able to do that, I
Dude,
couldn't
that
think
was
of a better way of spending a 50th birthday of,
yeah,
so
that was a great time. I enjoyed it. That was I've made several posts about it, but to your point of being of that kid like stuff, I my first tattoo was a Danzig skull, and I grew up as a
yeah,
huge Danzig fan. And Steve Zing wore a corpse paint record shirt on stage that night, and I was beside myself, like, because that inner teenager in
right.
me was just like, was like, oh my God, is this like even real? Like, what alternate universe am I in? That this is even possible. I grew up loving Sam Hain and of course, knew, and I met Zing when I started working for Danzig. He was the bass player. And so I knew he'd been in the band for quite a while, but just to see all that skull and those songs and like staring back at a corpse paint logo, that was a special moment. I'll never forget that. And on top of that, Steve called me like 2 days later after I got back home and was just so nice and he's like, hey, did you see I wore your shirt? And I was like, yes, I saw you wore my shirt. I was like, I was freaking out, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. And we had a really cool conversation. So yeah, man, that Vegas trip was, not only did we all have and the band sounded great, we had some personal highlights for all of
Right.
us. So it was, and then more stuff that we'll talk about soon, like really soon, was super awesome. So man, that Vegas trip in many ways was a really highlight on for us in more ways than one that we'll get to later. As we start to announce things of what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah, that Sunday, well, you went home on Sunday.
Yeah.
Gary, we were downtown Fremont Street, and we were eating lunch and that, and we were up on top. Kind of remind you of being down in the French Quarters. You know how people hang out up on top, and
On the
people are below
balconies.
you
Yeah.
walking. Yep. And anyway, it's like down that over there on Fremont Street, and we were eating, watching the people and everything. And every once in a while, you see these zip liners come flying by you.
Yeah.
And Gary goes, "You ever done that?" And I'm like, "No, I never done it." And he goes, "Well, get ready. We're going to be doing it here in about 10 minutes." And I turned to him and I said, "The fuck we are."
Ah,
And he goes, "No, you're going to do it. Have you ever done it?" And I'm like, "No, I've never." And he goes, "Oh, you'll love it. It's one of the coolest experiences you'll ever do." Da 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 da. And he talked me into doing it, and I'm glad he did
that
because
video is great, y'all.
Um,
That
I'm scared
video
to
of y'all
death of
too.
heights.
Really.
Yeah, but when we got done with it, and you're at the very end, and you're just hanging there, waiting to get down and that,
Losing your
and
dignity.
yeah, uh, I turned to Gary and I said, "Damn it, you know what?" And he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "We should have done this yesterday when Spaulding was still here with us. That would have been, we would have had, because we had a ball down on Fremont
Yeah.
Street." He goes, "Oh, no shit." He goes, "He would have loved it. Da, 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 da. And too bad we didn't." But,
Yeah,
you
man.
know, we stayed at the Rio. If you guys ever get a chance and you're in Vegas, stop by the Rio to that Kiss museum there. It's
Dude, what
Gene
is
Simmons's personal Kiss collection. If you're a Kiss fan, you would love this thing. And that was that was pretty cool to see, where we stayed at. But yeah, no, is a good time, and I understand because did your wife get the piss stain out of your pants after that night?
Which one?
Well, I thought, didn't you piss your pants when you seen your shirt being worn up on the Danzig show of
Oh, well, yeah, no, it did not. It has
I'm
been
just giving you a hard.
it is permanently it is still permanently there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
No,
that
that was cool to see because when you told me, he goes, "Dude, I think he's wearing my Corpse Paints Records shirt." And I said, "For real?" And you zoomed in, and we're
yeah,
like, "Holy shit, he is!"
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was, I don't know, those are just those weird moments in life that, um, you keep your composure because 'cause you're so excited, and the songs are happening, but when it's that inner child and that kid,
Yeah.
is all the stuff starts getting played back like a movie. You're like remembering. I remember when I discovered Danzig, I just moved to Mount Vernon, Ohio. I was in the 7th grade. I moved from Odessa, Texas, and I didn't have any friends because I was new. And I met this kid at school. His name was Mark Beeman, and it was the first kid's house I went over to my new friend that I made. And I went over to his house, and he had an older brother, Mike Beeman, and he was watching the first Danzig video, the home video. And I
Oh,
loved
really?
rock music. I was a rocker, but I was what MTV was selling me because
Yeah.
that's what I had. You know,
Right.
I lived in suburbia USA. I didn't live like in this, like in cities
In the
where
cities where you got the
yeah,
underground shit.
I didn't
Yeah.
have that until later. Um,
Right.
and so I was like, "What's this?" And it was him. The first video is in black and white, and it's him talking. It's like, "Do you believe in God?" And he's like, "Do I believe in God?" He's like, "Not as in some old man as a king, but as a power and a force." Yeah. And then it like goes, and I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God." And I was like, "Who is this?" And he's like, "This is Danzig." It
Yeah.
was maybe 1988, 90 or 89 or 90. Lucifuge had was just come out, and he said that
No.
he had 2 records. He's like, "This is the home video from the first one." So Lucifuge came out in 90. So it was 90. So yeah, that was 1990.
Isn't it funny how you kind of got your music back then? Is all undergrad that harder stuff, Slayer, um, Exodus, Testament, um, Sepultura, who's some of the bigger, the
Yeah,
heavier
yeah.
names back in that day. But you never heard them on the radio, like you
Nope.
said, and unless you're in a major city that was maybe doing over the air,
Sure.
not your traditional radio stations.
Or if they were in a big
MTV,
yeah,
yeah, MTV wasn't playing any of that till
not really.
really till you got what 2 hours of Headbangers Ball, and then that
Yes.
became so fucking commercialized that that ruined that deal.
It
But
did.
it's just funny how you found that music back then, like you said, through an older brother,
That was
or
it.
you went to a concert and guys
Oh,
were
the
handing
band
you
you've never
little
heard of.
demos.
Right.
Yep. And then you got demos, or you just got those mixed tapes of all this shit, and
Right.
you're like, holy crap.
Or you would
And
see a
then
video on MTV and some dude would be wearing a shirt of a band you haven't heard of. And you're
right,
like, I
yeah,
want to go check out them.
right, yeah,
Like
exactly.
Steven Adler wearing a TSOL shirt and those Guns N' Roses video, and it still trips me out that Steven Adler and Guns, but knowing Duff's background, because
Right,
a punk band,
right.
the True Sounds of Liberty, Jack Grisham,
And from Seattle.
uh, they're from the TSOL.
No, no, no.
Duff.
Duff. Yeah,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And he was in all those punk bands around there. But yeah. So to your point, yeah, you don't need it. It's weird how you found out. How did you find out about Crowbar and I Hate God from Phil Anselmo wearing
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Crowbar and I Hate
Yeah,
God shirts?
exactly. That's exactly when we seen him wear that in 5 minutes alone, right?
Uh-huh.
Is that music video that he was wearing the Crowbar shirt, and we were all like, "Who the fuck is Crowbar?"
Crowbar.
So instantly, then you're going to find their stuff.
Exactly right.
You go to a record store, CD store,
You
and you
nailed
didn't want to go to like Music Land or
it.
Sam Ash or any of
Tape.
them places.
Yeah.
You went to
It
what you
was
call
Audio
so
Wizard in my town.
right, of a good CD
Head a
shop
lot
that
of a
had
lot of the weed shops would sell them, the
yeah.
head shops too. Remember
But
that?
yeah, but you know what I'm talking about, because you'd find they would even have in the back room, they would have the bootleg shit of live concerts
It would.
of
Yeah.
on CDs and that, and
Right.
you get your hands on that, and then you bring it back to your hometown. Fuck, it was everybody wanted it, and
Yes.
but that's where you found a lot of that stuff.
Into
And
man, so tying that all together, like on the shirt. So Zing wearing the shirt that night, like
yeah,
that was really huge, for to how many sets of eyes looking at
right.
that, because people going home that night like,
Were they filming that for Access TV? Is that going to be on Access TV?
I don't know. I
I thought
know it
somebody
was
was
an
saying that
Access
there.
event. And there was a camera there since they had the screens. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, but no, that'd be cool if it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine now take that to the next level? Can you imagine if they did and that's going to come out on Access TV?
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
No, absolutely.
anyway, um, with that being said, it's good catching up with you again.
Yeah, dude, man, thanks so much. And so, I mean, I guess touching on the original topic's kind of a draw, but I think over time, I think, Prince's body of work and just the amount of time he spent, I think if you put all the musicians in a room, I think folks would say Prince is probably the better musician. Hendrix might be the better guitar player.
Yeah, I could see that of what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Now, here's another question though for you. Would you take the performance of Jimi Hendrix playing the national anthem at Woodstock over the Super Bowl performance of Prince?
Oh, that's a good debate. Another one would be, I think that you and I would do well on would be the Elvis versus Beatles. Who's bigger?
Yeah,
Who's the
that,
bigger
that,
pop
that-
culture influence?
well, that's a quick 30-second answer there of
Yeah, the Beatles are still doing it, right?
well, but in all fairness, I mean all the Beatles, every one of the members of the Beatles has said if it wasn't for Elvis, there'd be no Beatles. So that just summed that up of
Well, I yeah, they were definitely influenced, and they have said that for sure. But
the other avenue of that.
because
You take
that's
the
their
Beatles
opinion.
nationwide, and that's a fun subject because there's a lot of different things in that. And what I mean by that is Elvis never wrote anything. He always sang people's stuff.
Right.
The Beatles wrote their
That's right.
stuff, sang their stuff. They all had,
I think
but
Elvis,
on the other
he
side of
was an
that though too,
entertainer.
yeah, he was the entertainer, but also though too, a lot of people don't know this, but Elvis didn't even know how to read music.
Yeah.
And he would go off of the sounds. So if you watch even a lot of the older Elvis, like I think it's the Elvis tour or whatever, one of the movies that they did, uh, in that you'll see him telling when the band to come in on this note or this sound or whatever it may be. He directed all that. He knew exactly how he wanted his show to sound and everything. Take the later Elvis, they honestly didn't even know what song was going to be next. He would just start singing something. They had to be on cue to know it.
Sure.
And but you're talking
Yeah.
totally different aspects between that aspect
That'd
of
be
the
a
Beatles versus Elvis, of
that'd be a fun one for sure.
yeah. Yeah, old Tommy Boland's bass player in NYC, who was in Metal Church.
Huh?
I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but anyway, he does an Elvis tribute. It's called a Live 85.
Oh, okay.
It's all metal. You got to check this out. It's pretty bizarre. But it sounds really cool. He takes like 80s hair metal or songs from the 80s and early 90s, and he sings them like Elvis would, but in that metal form or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But
I do have the Danzig Sings Elvis record.
yeah, I do too. And you know, I was debating on wearing my Elvis shirt at that show, but I didn't. You and I talked about that,
Yeah.
and you know, that'd be a fun conversation with him. Do you know you'd lose that in a heartbeat, though?
Oh, sure, for sure.
Anyway, man, it was good catching up with you.
too, dude.
We'll
Enjoy the rest of your day.
get together.
Yeah.
And there again, thanks for everyone for checking us out and subscribing on our platforms. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the good stuff. And don't be afraid to hit any of us up. Get a hold of Spaulding if you guys have any questions. If you don't see anything on his website for the records or anything, I think you're in the midst of getting more of that in on different stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, appreciate everybody. Make sure to like and follow. Appreciate everyone watching our live. And till next time.
See you, Jason.
And by the way, thanks Gary, and thanks for everyone that helps support
Gary.
the show and everything. So
Till
next time, toodaloo, buckaroo.
Get ready to crank up the volume because you're about to enter the realm of rebels and rock stars. Unleashing the thunder from down under the stage. We're diving deep with a deviance of melody, rhythm, and chaos. Now push up your sleeves and get ready to dive into the pit. It's time for Sitting with the Slimy Bastards, Music Edition.